Thanks a lot. It's a pleasure for me to be able today to participate in this panel. I will focus on two aspects. Firstly, of course, use the opportunity to introduce you to the CTBT and the work that we are doing at the CTBT Preparatory Commission. And I will talk briefly about the treaty, its importance for the wider non-proliferation and disarmament regime, talk a little bit about the CTBT verification regime, try to give you an idea about the technical and scientific complexity that goes into it, and secondly, I will start making the link to the topic of this panel about education, that the importance of the treaty and the task that the CTBTO has been given by the international community is, which is on the back to put an end to nuclear explosions. That's a very large and complex task. That implementation of this task is the real challenge, and that serious implementation requires continuous and serious investment into education to bring about both the experts that can do the job and also a general public that is educated about these issues and supports the policies behind it. And that is really what disarmament and non-proliferation education in a broader sense is all about. So there have been over 2,000 slides. Don't worry.
Probably.
Don't worry. There will not be 2,000 slides. That's very good. There will be 8 slides, I think. So don't worry, and Charles, don't panic. There will be 8 slides, but there have been, and that's more serious, there have been over 2,000 nuclear explosions in the years from 1945 until this day. And this issue, explosions, was a very, very prominent issue from the 50s to the 90s, really. It was a security issue, it was a health issue, it was an environmental issue that was very much in the forefront of people's minds. Maybe today that's less the case, and of course it's good that this is less the case because there have been less nuclear explosions, but that doesn't mean that the topic has become in any way less important. It took 4 decades, really, until the comprehensive prohibition, the comprehensive nuclear test ban, was finally concluded in 1996 in the Conference on Disarmament. It creates a norm, a basic norm of prohibition, full comprehensive prohibition of all nuclear weapon test explosions or any other nuclear explosions, as stated in Article 1. Today, the CTBT is not yet in legal force. As you may know, this is the reason behind it is a very specific entry into force clause, which states that, which lists a whole number, namely 44 countries, all of which have to ratify the CTBT before it can enter into force, and those 9 still need to ratify it so that the treaty can enter into force. But nevertheless, the CTBT has already created a very strong international norm against nuclear testing. This norm is supported by 182 states. So why is the CTBT important? What is its contribution to disarmament and non-proliferation? What is its value? Of course, to put an end to nuclear testing is an important goal in itself, having said that there have been more than 2,000 nuclear tests, and that it's been the aspiration of the international community for basically half a century. But the contribution goes beyond this. The CTBT is a very important non-proliferation instrument. It complements the non-proliferation treaty. It limits the ability of countries that do not have nuclear weapons to develop these weapons, because it is necessary to test to develop nuclear weapons. This non-proliferation contribution is underpinned by a very comprehensive verification regime, which I'll touch upon briefly later. But the CTBT is also an important contribution to nuclear disarmament. It provides a firm legal line against, legal norm against nuclear testing. It curbs the development of new types of nuclear weapons, meaning that states that already possess nuclear weapons, if they wish to develop their nuclear weapons further, it is very difficult for them to do this without being able to test. And in this context, it's important to state that the CTBT is a non-discriminatory treaty, meaning that this obligation, the ban on nuclear testing, is the same for every state party of the treaty. And as was mentioned in the morning, the CTBT is also a strong life sign for multilateralism. It's a key example, really, that both political and technical complex issues can be addressed through multilateral structures. And in a time when multilateralism is often criticized for being not effective, that is a very strong message in itself. To ensure that the CTBT can fulfill its mandate, banning nuclear tests, it foresees a comprehensive verification regime which is really unprecedented in its scope and in its technical complexity. Primarily three pillars: an international monitoring system, an international data center, and on-site inspection capabilities. To explain that briefly, I hope you can see that. A nuclear explosion, of course, releases energy, and that energy can be measured in the form of different waves, depending on where the explosion took place. If an explosion was underground, we can measure seismic waves, pretty similar to an earthquake. If an explosion took place underwater, we can measure hydroacoustic waves. If it was atmospheric, then we can measure sound waves, infrasound waves. In addition, nuclear explosions release radioactive particles or radioactive noble gases. Sometimes in very small quantities. They reach the surface, then travel with the wind, basically, get dispersed. And we in the CTBTO have been building for the last 13 years this international monitoring system of well over 300 stations in almost 100 countries that can measure these waves down to very, very small quantities, energy quantities, and that can measure these particles also. They can pick up this, does it work? They can pick up these particles. Then secondly, data from these stations is then transmitted basically in real time to the International Data Center here in Vienna. That's the second pillar of the verification regime. We pass on this data to our member states, but we also analyze it and produce data bulletins about such events. With this data, member states can determine the location of an explosion, its depth, its magnitude. We can differentiate between natural events like earthquakes or man-made events such as a nuclear explosion. And in the past few years, luckily there were only two, still two too many, but there were only two nuclear explosions, both in North Korea in 2006 and 2009. And as regrettable as they were from a political and legal point of view, they at the same time gave us the opportunity to show that the system works. It proved its worth, and it proved that the whole concept of CTBT verification is valid. So as you can see and surely appreciate, this is a highly complex endeavor. You have 10 minutes. I need two more. Yeah? Sorry, John. It's extremely complex. It involves geophysicists, nuclear physicists, engineers, IT specialists, monitoring station operators, meteorologists, analysts, and so on. And finally, the final pillar are these on-site inspections, which I'm skipping over now, except for saying that this in itself involves a whole range of sciences and technologies, and we have been training on-site inspectors for the past 13 years. So in short, and that's already bringing me to the conclusion, the CTBT highlights in a very, very tangible and obvious way really the nexus between disarmament and non-proliferation policy on the one hand and science and technology on the other. The policy aim of banning nuclear tests cannot credibly be achieved without a sustained and serious investment into highly specialized science and technology skills. And similarly, the sciences and technologies and experts need to refine their approach to link it to the specific policy objective. So for a serious implementation of the CTBT, we need scientists who are skilled in their fields but also understand the policies. We need policymakers with an understanding of the technologies required for verification, and we need a general public who supports these efforts, who's interested in the work, who gets involved, be it as voters, taxpayers, students. And this is really what disarmament and non-proliferation education in the broad sense is all about in the way we see it. So I will stop here.
As Alex, I think, very effectively stressed, is the CTBT is one of the most effective measures in the international community, both as a multilateral tool, this was also emphasized by the Executive Secretary this morning, to promote world peace and security, but as a verification mechanism. It is not, clearly it's not the answer to all questions, but it is a very necessary and very important pillar of the broader international community's efforts to eliminate nuclear weapons. A lot of current challenges need to be overcome. Those of you, and I don't think I need to take a quiz in the room, will probably agree with me that the last, up until 2008, 2009 was what I described as the dark ages of nuclear non-proliferation and disarmament. That dark ages I think we can put behind us, but we still need to focus on how to emphasize to countries, including those countries with nuclear weapons, and of course there are a number of them that Alex mentioned. 9 states still have to ratify this treaty for it to enter into force, most particularly the United States, China, India, Pakistan, and of course Iran, North Korea, Indonesia, Israel, and others. So the challenge before us is to get these countries on board. We are very proud that we are at 182 members, one of the most universal treaties so far. However, we can do far more. There are still a lot of countries, other than the ones that I just mentioned, that still need to come on board. And then, very importantly, this is a political treaty with deep-based technical pillars. And we need to make sure that the verification system and the technologies that this treaty is based on are sustainable. And to be able to sustain something, you need to invest in it. And for that reason, we are looking at ways excuse me, to invest in the next generation of policy experts and technical and scientific experts that would not only work for the organization, but in a much wider international community support the technologies and the treaty in the future. So let me talk a little bit about disarmament education, something that I have been involved with for some time, and I think something that I believe in very strongly. First of all, I would like to highlight the United Nations Secretary General's report of 2002. This is as a result of an expert study that was conducted, which highlighted the importance on the role of international organizations in the development of nuclear disarmament and non-proliferation education strategies. So we in the CTBTO has taken this very seriously, and we are unrolling a number of these initiatives. Secondly, the recently concluded last year the International Commission on Nuclear Non-Proliferation and Disarmament recommended a major renewed emphasis on formal education and training about nuclear disarmament and related issues. And this was part of a report headed up by former Australian Foreign Minister Gareth Evans and the former Japanese Foreign Minister Yamaguchi. A very important report, contains a lot of important recommendations that all are aimed at the elimination of nuclear weapons. Then also important, the Secretary General's Academic Impact Initiative, unrolled last year, that acknowledges the critical role of higher education in economic and social development as a foundation for world peace. Amongst the elements that are highlighted among 10 universal accepted principles is the principle of conflict resolution. Conflict resolution and peace and security are two sides of the same coin. And then I'd also like to recognize in this opportunity, as I'm sitting next to my good friend Alex and a former colleague, Elena Sokova, the initiative taken by the Vienna Center for Disarmament and Non-proliferation, taken by the Austrian government to launch this center. This center, in my view, will be ideally placed to engage key international organizations here in Vienna in the field of non-proliferation and disarmament, such as the CTBTO and the IEA, and by linking these organizations with think tanks. And I'm obviously pleased that my former employer, the James Martin Center for Non-proliferation Studies, have been chosen to manage this, not only because of its expertise in the field, but also because of its role in disarmament education. Elena will undoubtedly say more about that. Let me just mention a few practical ways in which disarmament education could be implemented. First and foremost, I'd like to emphasize the need to step out, and I know there are a number of students here, but there are also a number of professors, to step out of the classroom into a real-world environment. Some of us who work in these buildings may think that this is not really the real world. People are being killed on the outside while we are moving papers around. But this is where real-world policy and politics take place. As a former academic, there's obviously a role for theory, but theory and practice go hand in hand. The need to step out and the value of stepping out of the classroom would not only enhance education experience, but also bolster the credentials of students in their career paths. And one of the main key issues that I've found that can do this is through internships. Internships are widely recognized as an effective way to develop students, but also to establish career paths. We're not talking about internship of people making photocopies or carrying teacups around. We're talking about internships where interns are fully immersed in the work of the organization. We're not talking about internships for 6 months, we're talking about 3 months, we're talking about 6 months to a year internships. And in fact, I want to recognize right in the front row here, so 2 of our current interns and 1 that has been a former intern and now working for the organization. So this is really part of not only education, but building a career path. The second point is fellowships. Some of you may be aware of the United Nations Fellowship Program. This is a program that's been going on for more than 30 years. Some of the alumni in the fellowship program are senior officials both at the IEA as well as at the CTBTO. We are very pleased in the organization that we hosted last year for a whole week 25 UN fellows. These are junior diplomats from a range of countries, mostly developing countries, that come here and are fully immersed in the work of the organization. Thirdly, simulation exercises. I don't know, but by show of hands, has anyone participated in the simulation exercise? All right, so there are a few. Simulation exercises have two in my view, 2 key objectives. One is to allow the participants to see the world through the eyes of others. Often if you put the simulation together, you'll have an American representing the Russian Federation, or in the case that I play in a class, an American representing Iran, and vice versa. Makes not only for interesting drama in the class, but the participants also understand the difficulties that their opponents would face in negotiation. The other important goal of simulation is that it requires the students to fully immerse themselves in the topic. You have to, if you want to negotiate on a topic, you have to understand the technical and political issues of the topic involved. And for that reason, it's a very important education tool. So it's something that I would promote very strongly. Fourthly, the use of multimedia and social networking linked to online and distance learning. The learning methods of today and tomorrow are no longer lectures based on scholarly books and journals, nor are they PowerPoint presentations, in all respect to Alex's presentation. But they need to be multifaceted, using cutting-edge technologies and equipment. The learning method of today is podcasting. The learning equipment of today is iPods and iPads, things that students can use outside the classroom. Inside the classroom is simply to give them some guidance. Discussion methods using Facebook pages and other online methods are the ways that students communicate and develop their thinking on particular issues. And then the last point here is the need for multidisciplinary curricula. The organization, the CTBT, is a multidisciplinary organization, as Alex just explained. I'm a diplomat, but in working here and in promoting this treaty and the entry into force of this treaty, you need a very, very solid technical understanding. So if I had to be trained for this job that I'm doing, I would have taken a significant amount of technical courses to understand the science behind this treaty better. Let me wrap up by saying something on capacity development. The Executive Secretary initiated this initiative with the full realization, as I mentioned earlier, that we need to invest in the future. This treaty is 15 years old. It was signed in 1996, but the signing was only the culmination of many, many years of efforts and scientific research in the technologies. For instance, seismic technology, the basis of seismic technologies dates from the 60s. This is the core of the technology that we use to detect nuclear testing. This is still very effective, but who knows what technologies will develop over time, and also who knows what technologies will develop over time in the nuclear weapons field. So it's very important to stay up to date with the technologies. It's also very important for the organization to remain vibrant and for us to recruit the best and the brightest people working here, notwithstanding the two that's sitting up on top here. Sorry, speak for you. But so this necessitates building and maintaining the capacity to effectively confront the technical, scientific, and political and legal challenges. As a way to start off this approach, we unrolled an intensive course. Alex, if you could just, it's on the screen, last year in October. I know that Dr. Winkler from the Academy was part of that, and perhaps some of the other students that may be here from the Diplomatic Academy. The whole idea behind this was to have a week-long intensive course focusing on all aspects of the treaty, including the technical aspects. It was live-streamed. It is now archived, and if you look at our website, you will find all the lectures there. But this is just the first step. What we envisage is online distance learning modules that we hope to unroll by the summer or the fall of this year. We hope to partner with a number, and I hope literally to have thousands of universities and research institutions on our database. And I see that ACUNS is an ideal partner for us in this. And we will encourage you to work with us. We see this both as partners, well as recipients, as well as partners. We see the way that students can benefit from these modules. For instance, modules would include, and these modules could be pulled through to other international organizations as well. We hope to encourage also organizations such as the IEA, the OPCW that works on chemical weapons, to consider similar approaches. For instance, modules could look at the legal mechanisms to implement these treaties. They could look at the technical verification mechanisms. They could look at the ways to ensure compliance through inspections. We have on-site inspections that will kick in force when the treaty enters into force. The OPCW have challenge inspections, but the basic theory behind inspections remains similar. So we hope that this could make an active contribution towards disarmament education, which in the end is what the international community needs. I am pleased to see that in this room there are many of the current and the previous generation, but I'm equally pleased to see that there are many of the next generation here. And the world's peace and security are in the hands of those in the next generation. Thank you very much.
With global governance becoming increasingly deeper and issue areas more and more multifold, we need more and more detailed technical knowledge. Think about global health issues, for instance. That is very much an issue of global governance, and traditional diplomacy alone doesn't help you much there. You need the input from medical experts, for instance, as well. When it comes to the environment, obviously science at the very forefront of all of that, even in order to make us understand something like climate change or the issue whether that happens in the first place. And with the IAEA and the CTBTO, for instance, this is even more acute. It's quite clear that we need very detailed understandings about how the world works here. Because after all, these organizations are about verification in order to prevent something absolutely horrible from occurring. They're shields against cheating, kind of cheating that we cannot afford in today's world. So what kind of education do we need then? Here I'm coming back now to what I summarized in my thesis statement already. First of all is the ability to zoom out. Think about traditional university programs, traditional university disciplines. They're all about the differentiation of the differentiation of the differentiation, if we go on like this, of knowledge. So there are lots and lots of different disciplines dealing with politics, for instance, but all from different angles. There's economics, there's sociology, there's psychology, there's political science, and so on and so forth. And what all of these disciplines produce is highly, highly specialized knowledge, but it's quite difficult to get an overview of all of that. And when we think about philosophy of science, when we read things, then Max Weber, for instance, in the 1920s was already very, very upset about this differentiation of the differentiation of the differentiation, and so on. So it seems to me what we need actually is not just one unidimensional lens, but multiple lenses. And I'm going to go back to what that actually means. Second, we need the ability to zoom in. Zooming in means that we need specialized knowledge. And specialized knowledge is something that to some extent the traditional university education can deliver on the theoretical part, but not on the practical one. So there's a big divide between theory and practice. And this is a particular problem for us, for our ability to zoom in. Now what can a professional school such as mine do in order to deal with these problems? Partly, I think there's good news. I think that we're pretty good at zooming out. So in our case, we have 4 different disciplines. So therefore, we're not unidimensional. We have different lenses. We teach economics, law, history, and political science, and apart from that, a couple of other things as well. That makes for 4 distinct vantage points. So that means that our students learn building blocks and experimenting with how to put these building blocks together. Because there's no one teacher and no discipline that can do this. It's up to the student to arrange these things, assemble these things, and compose them together into a coherent whole. On top of that, there's intensive language training. Students come from more than 50 nations, which means, again, we counter the kind of unidimensionality that you might find in traditional university educations. But then let me be very frank. Obviously, we too have our problems, and we too encounter our limitations. And one of the limitations, obviously, is when it comes to zooming in. So what vehicles do we have for zooming in? Well, we proceed from the general to the specific. We start with very general core courses, we move to advanced courses, and then we have optional courses. And these optional courses deal with very narrowly confined issue areas. For instance, nuclear non-proliferation, or even more narrowly confined than that. We invite practitioners to teach with us. Alexander Gment, for instance, done with me on non-proliferation. That's very much appreciated. Our students write theses. They have two supervisors. One comes from the academy, the other one from the outside. And there might be a few people here in the room, actually, from the CTBT or from the IE who have been second supervisors in the past, and many thanks to them as well. But then, on the other hand, obviously, there's only so much we can do when it comes to detailed knowledge. Here, in this very building, there's a kind of detailed knowledge that an institution like us could never ever match. When we look at very, very abstract philosophical understandings about how we make up our minds, about how we reason, there's often a distinction made between universals and particulars. So universal is the general knowledge, particulars is the more narrowly confined detailed knowledge. And as philosophers tell us, from Arendt from Kant to Arendt, Biener, and so on and so forth, psychologists as well, the trick in terms of reasoning is to put them together. So our reasoning really presupposes that we know something about general knowledge and something about specific knowledge. And there are two pathologies that we have in decision making. Number one is that most decision makers have too few universals at their disposal. It means the lenses by which they look at, or the lens by which they look at, is very, very narrow. And number two, that they neglect particulars and simply rely on universals. They just pigeonhole a particular event in a certain box and rely only on the universal, only on the general knowledge, without really looking into the specific things. Okay. Gonna call for order. All right. So let me wrap up. How can we improve then on the kind of education that we offer? And I think one concept that comes there in my mind, just to throw it in, is something like networked education. And for this conference, one of the descriptions for it, something like that, came actually out quite nicely. So, because from our point of view, from the view of a professional school, it's really important to be able to zoom in, to become better at zooming in. Let's think about the Bologna Master. We heard from Christa Jonsson today about this. He's mentioned Bologna Master in the context of employability, and that's very important. Another important thing about the Bologna Master is a 2-year program. So that means, on the face of it, 1 year for the zooming out, 1 year for the zooming in. That seems to be a very reasonable division of labor. And that could be networked education. So we would just have to think about strengthening our networks. Internships, I think, are a very good idea, but there's much more than we can do. I mean, perhaps we can even think about some joint programs in the future, and I'd be very much in favor of that. And I think that Vienna is a very good place to think about this, because there are some UN institutions, some very important ones. There are lots of educational institutions, not only mine, obviously. There are think tanks, and I think it is about bundling resources in order to be able to zoom in and to zoom out. And then it would be also one of my dear wishes, and perhaps we can discuss that then further later on, that we don't just talk about it, but that we actually do it as Tibor put it before, and actually just do it.
It is a wonderful opportunity for me to introduce the new Vienna Center for Disarmament and Non-proliferation, and couldn't be more timely the topic of this two-day conference on connecting academic and UN organizations. When I was thinking about today's panel and just overall the conference, there are so many topics that we could cover, including from just general speaking about the non-proliferation education, disarmament and non-proliferation education, and various organizations involved with it, the role of member states, of international organizations and the like. We could talk about the already existing institutions working in this field, and we could talk about the methods and formats. My understanding is that we will have a discussion of some of these issues tomorrow. So what I will be limiting my remarks to is basically just to highlight a couple of already existing decisions by UN system and international organization on the importance of disarmament and non-proliferation education, and talk a little bit about the experience of the institute and center I currently represent, and then about the establishment of the Vienna Center and the plan ahead that we envision for this organization. Oops. I probably, for speaking to this large audience, and I'm sure that most of you here, because of your genuine interest to disarmament and non-proliferation issues, you are familiar with the history of disarmament in the UN system, and some of the most significant decisions about the disarmament in the UN come from the first session on disarmament issues in 1978 and a number of follow-up sessions of the United Nations. However, specific focus on education and training in disarmament and non-proliferation didn't come until early 2000, when a first group of government and non-governmental experts was tasked with preparing a study and recommendations for the United Nations on specifically disarmament and non-proliferation education. After 2 years, the group produced 34 recommendations, and the United Nations General Assembly unanimously approved this resolution with, in 2002, where all 34 practical recommendations were laid out, with specific recommendations for member states, for international organizations, and global community in general. We would probably spend the rest of the panel discussing some of these recommendations, but I would generally highlight that one of the recommendations was about reporting for member states about the results of the implementation of these recommendations every other year. Unfortunately, that has not been a case that governments, including the nuclear weapon states, were reporting on these recommendations regularly. In 2008, only 7 states reported on the work in the non-proliferation education and disarmament. This is certainly something that needs to be changed. There has been quite a lot of progress on the work of international organizations and how they establish coordinators for disarmament and non-proliferation education. We've heard even today at a number of important projects and developments in this area. However, there's no time for complacency as well. We really need to make sure that education in this important area continues and grows. Just wanted to highlight some of the most recent developments. For the first time, the importance of non-proliferation and disarmament education was included in the final document of the review conference for the Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty in 2010. The work plan on nuclear security summit that took place in Washington, D.C. in April 2010 and communique also put a very strong emphasis on the human capital development and preparing specialists for work in the area of nuclear security. A little bit about the center and our role in providing non-proliferation education. The James Martin Center, established in 1989, is a research center which is part of the Monterey Institute of International Studies, which is a private university with a graduate school. We only offer graduate degrees. Lately, we are more associated with it as a graduate school of Middlebury College. That is our new parent association. The mission of the center, which is over 20 years now, is specifically focused on combating weapons of mass destruction proliferation by training the next generation of WMD non-proliferation specialists as well as disseminating timely research and information and analysis. We started first offerings of courses on non-proliferation in 1993 and established a formal certificate program as part of the master's degree program in 96. And this year, in September, for the first time, and I believe this is the first program at least in the United States that offers former master's degree program in WMD, non-proliferation and terrorism studies. Obviously, we have the focus, because the center primarily focused on policy issues, we do provide emphasis on history, on treaties, on policy issues, regional challenges, practices and processes. However, we do also pay quite close attention to technical issues and put more emphasis on science in the classroom for policymakers. So it has to be a multidisciplinary approach in our view. We are also very fortunate that we have a number, or used to have a number of practitioners on our staff, but we're lucky that we have kind of flow in and flow out. Jean Dupree, who spoke before, was one of our professors teaching about international organizations and regimes to the students in this program. We do pay quite close attention not only to the academic coursework for our students, but to the on-the-job training. Most of our students have an opportunity to work part-time as graduate research assistants at the center. And we also offer a number of internships. And many of our current students, even this semester, probably in Vienna, there are 3 or 4 of them taking internships both at CTBTO and the IAEA, hopefully other organizations as well. In addition to academic programs, we do offer a number of professional development programs, and that is offered both to diplomats, government officials, journalists, faculty. In our visiting fellows program in Monterey, it's an intensive semester-long program. We do offer sometimes short courses, and I see here some of my partners for the work we did on the issues related to international safeguards for students at our institute and other universities in the United States. We have, in addition to professional development programs, some outreach programs for high schools where we think that is very important. And it's just in general the credo of the work we do is to teach them how to think, not what to think. So that is one of the most critical skills for the room, both in academic institutions but also in high school program. In terms of the ongoing collaboration or past collaboration with international organizations, the research and faculty from our center and university have been fortunate to be engaged in research and training activities of a number of international organizations as speakers, lecturers, consultants. We quite often are drawn in to provide training to Disarmament Fellows Program, some of the IAEA-sponsored training programs. We're a registered observer with the IAEA and just to recently signed a memorandum of understanding with the CTBTO on some of the educational work. And you will probably hear a presentation tomorrow, I believe, from the Office of Nuclear Security of the IAEA about the international network of nuclear security educators. That was also one of the projects we worked jointly with them in order to stand up this network, these organizations, to be part of our classroom. And luckily, the technologies that exist now allow to do it. And I'm sure some of our former students or current students could be the best attestment in terms of bringing practitioners from both governments, international organizations, via Skype to answer questions from students. This is certainly requires some effort, some coordination, putting together the resources, but is a very effective way of linking practitioners in academia. And lastly, but not the least important, is the the establishment of the Vienna Center for Disarmament and Non-proliferation. You already heard some of the introductory points about it. It was something that was an initiative from the Austrian government, Ministry of European and International Affairs, to have a hub or a platform for academic institutions, international organizations, NGOs, governments to here in Vienna, and to, as you rightfully pointed out, to have a bundling effect in terms of bringing together experts from all these different fields and promote dialogue, research, and education and training in the area of disarmament and non-proliferation. And we really hope that with the working jointly with other universities and experts here, which we've already been fortunate to be introduced to in the past couple of weeks, we're really looking forward to become such a platform and a hub for dialogue and research and education. And we just couldn't resist, and again referring back to the timeliness of having even being here in Vienna at that time. We had a formal opening of the Vienna Center for Disarmament and Non-proliferation just this past Friday, February 25th. And as you see, we had two heads of very important international organizations here in Vienna to be present at the ceremony. And we've got a big megaphone as a tool to amplify the voice of civil society, academia, and NGOs in this field. So I'm really looking forward to, working here in Vienna. I'm designated executive director of the Vienna Center, but we're, as I was told, still in transition, and hopefully, starting early April, we'll be able to do more in the field and work with many of you here. For more information and for contacts, please refer to the screen.